Hi, my name is Isan Shafi, and I am here to talk about The Last Call. Now, this book intrigued me a lot because I always had a fascination about the Prohibition and how it came to be passed. And so, when reading this book, I was very well entertained, and the thing that the book did best for me was the fact that it went into so much detail and it gave so much information about each process and how people reacted, how people went about it, and what people thought about it. And this to me was very good for me because so much details were put in, and you can see that the author had put a ton of research into compiling all of this data to put into the book. And one of the things that caught my attention the most was how alcohol was still permitted for the religious purposes, for example, the sacramental wine and the wine used in the Jewish sacrament, I think. And so it was very intriguing to see how winemakers were still being able to produce wine for those religious meetings, and in doing so, created a very, very big business, almost to the point where it was a monopoly and it was becoming into a conglomerate. And this was very surprising to see because of the idea of why the wine was being used. And another big thing you saw was that many people started going to church more often or going to these Jewish meetings or actually claiming to be rabbis in order to get these wine. And it was it was very surprising to see so many people impersonating religious officials in order to get a large quantity of wine. And another thing that I found interesting in the book was the way that Wheeler went about to try to set the law in motion, and how at first they were given a 6 to 7 year deadline to pass the bill within the House. And although many of the opposers of the law never thought it would happen, the people who are known as the Dries knew that they needed to pass the bill before the 1920, before the new caucus came in, where the population will be shifted from more rural and more supportive of dry to the city, which is more supportive for the wets. And this was very interesting to read because of the mindset he had in and the things he already knew that had to be done in order to pass the bill. And so when the wets passed the bill in order for the bill to go to the House, and it eventually won, it was it was surprising to all, and this led to the prohibition to actually becoming true. And all of this just contributed to how later in the years you're going to have a big boost in organized crime as well as big boost in delinquency in the United States. And going into that, well, you have the mafia, which are usually the Italians, who first picked up onto this big business of illegal alcohol trading and smuggling, and where you have people like Al Capone who eventually ran an entire region of the country because that's how powerful alcohol was back then. And the fact that so much violence was created in order to keep people drinking is saddening but also surprising because of the scope of how far they would go to get their drink. And another thing that came up during the time was the Border Patrol and how it was actually originally made to border or to patrol the border of Canada to keep smugglers from bringing in alcohol. And this is something that people forget today, that Border Patrol was not meant to keep illegals out at the beginning, but rather it was created to keep people from smuggling contraband into this country. And that's what many people fail to realize or fail to remember. And this just all contributes to how big alcohol was in our country at the time. Also, we do owe the prohibition movement being mostly advocated by women, and we owe that prohibition was basically the last forefront of women trying to get their rights, and how these two topics are related to each other. And so you have many women who get tired of their husbands of drinking away their money, their savings, their food on the table, and eventually many went into extreme lengths to stop the alcohol business and to prevent their husbands from doing these misdeeds to their family. And you have this one lady who I cannot remember her name at the moment, but how she went into saloons, destroying the saloons inside, and how she used a hammer to destroy everything, and she destroyed a surplus of more than 30 saloons in her time because she was fed up with the males drinking away everything they owned. And so she is one of the extreme examples of how bad it was for women at the time, because they experienced a lot of abuse and they experienced a lot of violence from their husbands and what males in general. And so this led to them bringing each other together to fight for the tolerance of alcohol. And this also dragged many of the well-known politicians in and helped advocate for the dries. And one of the main person who helped advocate for them was William Jennings Bryan, who was a people's person, and many looked up to him with a view of someone who was great. And when he finally joined in for tolerance of alcohol, he brought it in where it was not just tolerance, where mediation of drinking, but abstinence and completely for alcohol. And when he started advocating for that, that led to a surplus of people joining the dries to help pass the prohibition. And so this book, I felt that it was very well put together because of the amount of details they used for explaining how each and every effect and causes the prohibition had. And so it goes into even the outside groups where one might not think had any effects from the prohibition, but in reality it had a very large effect. And so the last topic that I want to talk about is how World War I affected the passing for prohibition. And it was very surprising to see that, well, one already knew that Germans owned much of the beer business and much of the shops, uh, drafts, and all of that. And so when World War I came in, there was a big propaganda where it was either support the troops or support German alcohol. And this played at people's patriotism, because who would want to betray their troops and go for their enemies? And so you see that many of the big producers of alcohol suddenly plummeted during and after World War I because of their ethnicity. And this was very surprising to see. I would like to thank you for listening to me, and have a good day.